now is the best time for buyers to be purchasing a home. So is this something that you think you agree with?
I agree 100%. There's so many people out there that want to just talk about, I'm going to wait for the market to come down, I'm going to wait for prices to fall, wait for rates to come down. The problem is that if there's a little bit of room and a little bit of inventory out there and you don't pounce now, you're going to be waiting in line in the bidding wars come the springtime, because there's a lot of people sitting on the sidelines because of the rates. The best thing I can tell anybody is that if you can afford it today, even if it's temporary, you should jump on it today, because you have much less competition and you can always refinance.
Welcome to another episode of Small Town Famous. It's Kristen, and I'm here joined by my good friend and mortgage lender, Jeff Trudel with CMG Financial.
Thanks,
Welcome.
Kristen. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. This past week, I'm really big into social media, obviously. Even though right now we're still in Southern New Hampshire at less than 1 month's inventory supply, which is a little different than other parts of the country, but it's still, I'm able to show buyers more homes the past couple weeks than I have been able to in 3 years.
I know.
So this morning I did 4 showings back to back with the same buyer.
Right.
I haven't done that in years because there weren't 4 homes to show.
It used to be like, oh, you like this one? Let's take it, right?
Yeah, that's the only one.
Yeah, now, so the options do open up a little bit, and it's certainly in pockets. But again, it just like we took a trip from my town down into Worcester. Mm-hmm. We counted no less than 30 houses for sale along the way. So that was a telling sign to me, is that, yes, that's a little bit west of Route 3. That's an area people are still flocking to, and now property is coming on the market. I'm wondering what's motivating some of these sellers right now. So.
Yeah, I actually was just reading an article. I was listening to a podcast on my way in and then read the article. Realtor.com came out and said that 3 of the top 20 emerging markets in the U.S., ready for this? Manchester, New Hampshire, Concord, New Hampshire, and Worcester, Massachusetts.
Yep.
Do you know the median home price in Manchester is $535,000?
Really?
$535,000.
I knew it was climbing. I didn't know it was that high.
That's high.
It is high.
That's high for Manchester.
It is.
Us locally, obviously, we know why. It's an emerging market because it was always so affordable. But now when buyers have less selection, you're moving in further up the 93 from Boston.
Right.
So,
yeah, and it's interesting because it's still such a good commuter location, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people are being forced back to the office now, which, that's fine. It is what it is, but it's still easy access, and so many
Concord
people,
too, right off the highway.
A lot of people outside of New England really have no idea what Southern New Hampshire has to offer.
Yeah.
We talk about it too, right? You have the beaches, you have the lakes, you have the mountains, and you got Boston all within an hour of each other. Mm-hmm. Hugely desirable place to live. Plus, you've got good, high-paying jobs. So there's a lot of relocation here. People will deal with the winters, right? But yeah, still a super attractive place to live.
I've been doing these market updates, going out to just clients that we're actively working with. And my one for the month of September, I was talking about the unemployment in our area is at less than 2%, which is so much lower than the average in the country. Yeah. So it's just, if you're going to sell, now is still a great time. And if you're going to buy, everyone's always like, oh, realtors are always saying it's a great time to buy, a great time to sell. Right. But we're still at less than 1 month's inventory, but there's more inventory than there was 3 months ago.
Right.
So
right.
As a buyer, it's better than it has been.
Yep.
It's not great, but it's better. And as a seller, there's still not enough inventory, so it's still a great time. Absolutely.
Everybody thinks that there's, I don't know that they necessarily think there's a way to time the market, but you really can't, right? So 3 years ago, when rates were at 2.875, people would call in to me and be like, oh, why so high, right? Yeah. And now here we are quoting 8%, and they're like, wait a second, what's going on? Why so high, right? Yeah. So you can't time it. We don't know what the floor is. We don't know what the ceiling is. So now is always the best time to buy, because it comes back to affordability, and it's individual. If you have the means to do it, you don't want to be in a hugely competitive situation. So now is always the best time to buy. If it works for you, you should do it. Mm-hmm. Don't wait for prices to come down, because to your point of Manchester being $500,000+ average home sale price, that's not coming down, because people still want to come and live here.
Well, and if you look at the prices of everything else, the price of our milk isn't going down, our gas isn't going down, nothing's going down.
Right. Those things, the everyday consumer staple stuff will, sort of shake itself out over time. Housing is a basic need, kind of, like food is, but that will have a tendency to sort of flush itself out and normalize. Housing here has been on the increase since 2017. It's nothing but go up. Because you have such high demand to live in the area, there isn't any tell out there that says that it's going to, even level off. I mean, it's going to level off. There'll be some pockets where, there's a little bit over inflation, but we're not going to talk about like 25, 30% price declines. That's not coming anytime soon.
Right, yeah. So right now, there's also quite a few homes that are coming back on the market. From what I've seen, there's been a few of the ones that I've looked at that people have lost their job or their financing fell through once they actually ran the numbers and realized it was more than what they could afford. Yeah. But also just for buyers, if they're doing a home inspection and the seller's not willing to negotiate on home inspection items, the buyer has more options of other houses to look at than they did historically.
Right.
So when you're representing a buyer, are you offering certain loan programs that can help buyers in situations where maybe it's sat for a week and they have a little, that sounds so bad, 1 week, it's sat for 1 week.
I know.
So you have a little bit of flexibility, but what kind of
right.
loan programs are you offering that can help buyers out?
So for the buyers, again, it depends on the situation, but if they have the means, the temporary rate buy down has been the program. That has helped people really move the needle and get into the house. And that's just simply a function of, we can take your rate from, say, 8.25% today down to 5.25%, and it's a 3-year tiered, repayment, right? So year one, your payments are now based at 5.25%. Mm-hmm. Year 2, it goes to 6.25%. Year 3, your repayment 7.25%. You should refinance within that time frame. And if you do, the money that you use to temporarily buy down that rate actually pays down your principal balance. Mm-hmm. So any money that's left over for those set aside funds for the rate buy down are actually going directly to pay down your principal. Mm-hmm. We couple that with our rate rebound program, which simply allows the buyer, if they purchase today they make 6 payments. When rates come down by 0.5% or more, they basically refinance with no lender fees and an additional $1,000 credit. So
That's
that should
huge.
take care of your title fees or appraisal and that kind of thing.
Yep.
We want to make sure that buyers are comfortable buying today, but we also have some incentives that work for them that make it a little bit more palatable to see. 8% has a significant increase to your monthly payment, but when you drop that rate down into the low 5s, on a $600,000 house, you're probably looking around $700-800 a month in savings.
Wow.
It's a huge, huge benefit for them to do that.
Yeah, so any of my buyers that I've been talking to about this, they've never heard of it before.
Yeah.
But so correct me if I'm wrong, but if you were buying maybe a $500,000 house, you could buy it for $510,000, but then get $10,000 back from the seller.
Yep.
Potentially in closing costs, and you'd use that $10,000 to temporarily buy down your rate.
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
So the difference between a $500,000 purchase and $510,000 is very small incrementally for your monthly payment, but having that $10,000 cash back to use to buy down your rate is going to greatly impact your monthly payment.
And it really benefits the buyer today specifically. We do know rates are going to come down, right? Mm-hmm. We've tried to play the forecast game, and even the Fed doesn't really know how things are going to shake out, right? So we just know that the market is fluid. It will come down at some point. It should be temporary at this rate, just like it was temporary at 2.875. But it puts them in a good position now, and it at least allows them to feel comfortable at the entry point to say, okay, I'm going to save $700 a month right off the rip in this first year. It allows them to prepare for what may come, when the real repayment kicks on in 2 years or so down the line. But it makes it a lot more palatable to get in today.
Yep, that makes sense. So what is the best advice that you would give buyers right now who are kind of on the fence about buying now versus waiting, say, 6 months to just see what happens?
We just always tell them, have a conversation with us. Give us 5 minutes. Let's talk through the application piece of the things. Let's see where you stand. And then let's run the real numbers and make sure you're comfortable with it. Because everybody's got a number in mind, but they always start with the house price. Mm-hmm. They never really start with the monthly payment.
Right, yeah,
right?
The house price
and
doesn't
so
matter.
That's why we talk to them like, well, wait a second. You're paying $2,500 a month for rent. What does it look like if you own a house? And what are your means to get that house? So we just try to tell them, look, if you can swing it, do it now. Mm-hmm. And here, that's when we open up the book and say, look, if the credit piece is good, your income is good, you have money for down payment, regardless of what that amount is, we can open up the product book and say, look, temporary buy down's your best bet. Maybe you buy down discount points. You use the rate rebound to couple with this. And we even have tools for the sellers as well for properties that are sitting for maybe longer than a week. But,
Yeah.
but you know, they have the ability to lock in interest rates on the homes they're selling to try to attract more buyers.
Yeah, like I said, it's just the market has changed a little bit. We still have such a strong seller's market in our area, but there's just little pockets of houses that are sitting. And yesterday I showed this cute little cape in Newton, New Hampshire that's been sitting for 129 days. Today I showed a house in Wyndham that's been sitting 63 days. It's just interesting because you wouldn't have thought that would happen.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, you know how it is. Real estate's hyper local, right? So it could be down to a neighborhood, let alone a town. So, you know, we've seen a lot of unique properties kind of hit the market lately, and those are ones that will tend to sit a little bit. Properties with ADUs and that kind of thing. You know, anything that has like a unique property kind of thing about it may sit a little bit longer. Again, we're just trying to get people to really take a look to see where they stand today because, like I said, the flood's coming in the spring. We know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, last year we didn't think we were going to sell any mortgages at 7%. We were busy from March 1st all the way through basically 3 weeks ago. So it was like super crazy.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Yeah. Historically, this is the best time of year for buyers to get in because I think we had 2 or 3 listings last January that this sounds very entitled of me, but they sold either at or under asking, which was not normal for the market we had seen.
Yeah.
But our market didn't really start heating up a lot again until middle to end of February.
Yeah.
And then it was wild seller's market again until now we're still seeing it.
Yeah.
So, but just in general in our area, buyers kind of cool down on their search in the fall and winter. So
for sure, the seasonality is definitely a thing, especially in Southern New Hampshire. It is a great time for buyers right now, typically November through February because there's just less people in the market looking for that. So you get people coming out of the woodwork thinking there's going to be a deal out there. And right now, with more inventory, there may be a deal out there, you know. And people tend to come out of the woodwork in the spring just simply because they want to make sure that everything is ready to get into the new school system, or, you know, there's going to be a lot more inventory options and that kind of thing. But that's when you start climbing all over everybody, or they're all climbing over each other to try to fight out for the deal, and they're waiving inspections, and they're, you know, no one's giving seller concession and that kind of thing. So. Now you have a much more, there's a much higher propensity for sellers to give you or negotiate, you know, some terms with you right now.
The other thing, we were talking about this the other day, but with new construction, the credits that you've seen or the incentives that you've seen builders giving the buyers to buy their lots. I mean, we've seen it. There's not a lot of new construction, to be honest, in Southern New Hampshire, but in Rockingham and Hillsborough, that's primarily where I work. There are some builders that are doing like free upgrades, or you had talked about doing the rate lock. Do you want to explain that?
Yeah, the list and lock program has been hugely successful for CMG. Basically, what it does is it allows, you know, the builder, in this case, if we're talking new construction, to lock the rate and advertise it on the MLS. Effectively, what they're doing is they're giving a concession, and it's up to them. They can do 1%, 2%, or 3%. And if they're building a $900,000 house at 3%, that concession's $27,000.
Right.
The whole idea with that is that now they're effectively buying the rate down by almost $27,000. So you have a permanent buy down. They pay $1,000 just to have this feature and advertise the lower rate. The idea is it's going to attract a lot of buyers saying, "Hey, Mr. Buyer, today's rate's 8.25%. You can lock this loan for up to 60 days, and today it's at, you know, 6.375, and that's a permanent rate lock. So that's not a temporary one. Buyer has the option; they can use that program, or they can do the temporary buy down. But it allows the builder to come in and say, "Look, we're going to give you a huge incentive here and make this house a lot more affordable at, you know, a discounted rate versus what the current market rate is." Yeah,
I think that's a huge benefit for buyers. I mean, for builders and for sellers that maybe have those unique properties that are sitting longer than they expected. That's a better idea than lowering the price.
Yeah, I think
you just have to have the right person marketing that information to get out to to buyers.
And that's it. The thing that's great about that program too is that, we'll work with, whether it's a listing agent, the builder, the seller themselves, like on how to go through that process. And they get all the marketing collateral behind it. There's a website that comes along with it. And the list agent will, obviously get all of that stuff to supplement what they're going to do to market. But it does put the seller in control. It should attract buyers. We've seen that work really well. Again, it's just another way to try to help people navigate, the uncertainty in the market.
Yeah.
So that's been a really good program for properties that are sitting.
So is there any good news coming out of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac?
Yeah, I know. In the world of doom and gloom, yes. They're actually doing some good things to sort of enhance home affordability and that kind of thing. So I would say with Fannie Mae, they just caught up, and they're going to now allow people to buy multifamily homes, so 2 to 4 units, with as little as 5% down. Typically, when they're doing that kind of thing and they roll that product out, it's because they're looking to see what HUD does, right? Because FHA you can buy with 3.5% down.
Right.
So they see those loans performing really well. So Freddie says, all right, well, we want to get in on this market too. So instead of having 25% down now to buy a 3 or 4 unit on a conventional loan, you can do it now with as little as 5% down.
Yeah.
So that
helps the average consumer be able to purchase a multifamily, because for a long time now we've been in such a competitive market that only investors could get them.
Yep.
They had better terms. They usually had cash.
Right.
But for a buyer to be able to do 5% down, that's huge.
It is huge. And if you think about it just from the standpoint of, so let's say you have either a single person or, a young couple, no kids yet or something along those lines, and they want to start an investment portfolio, and they're going to live in the property. It's a great way to do it because all the rents will help them offset, their mortgage payment. So I think that's what they were looking at and saying, well, if the property can pay for itself, then it's really a low-risk loan.
Right.
You got to have your credit qualifiers and all that, but at the end of the day, if the property cash flows itself, it's really a good program.
It's been difficult, I think, for FHA buyers to even be entertained for multifamilies because, most of the multifamilies in our area were built in 1900 or 1920, and they're old and they have issues, and it's harder to get them passed through FHA.
The property standards are definitely an issue when it comes to FHA, because that means the seller now has to do some work to the property to get it ready to sell, and do they want to go through that and lengthen the process? So it takes it away from the conventional option, takes that piece out of the equation, which is good. So, and then there's still cash assistance options and that kind of thing for these programs. So good developments there.
Yeah, that's
they
awesome.
also Fannie increased the loan amounts again, so the standard conforming loans are $750,000. Again, just lends itself to all these property values going through the roof.
Yeah.
But it's so much easier to qualify for conventional financing than it is for jumbo financing. So that was a big development. We see that a lot in Rockingham County, because the property values here are crazy because you are so much closer to Boston, and commuter location. So
have the FHA loan limits increased or just conventional?
Yeah, those are going to go up as well. They generally follow suit with Fannie, so we don't have that stuff yet, but that's coming.
Okay, yeah, I think it's very interesting to me that the FHA loan limit for Hillsborough County is $498.5. $498.
I know, when you think of the highest incomes in the state, right? Hillsborough County's got 6 or 7, in the top 10 or something like that. So.
Well, and there's such limited inventory in both counties that buyers are looking the whole border. If they have to drive 5 extra minutes to get to Pelham, they're driving 5 minutes to get to Pelham, but that's Hillsborough County, so it's such a lower loan limit.
It is, and that's one of the challenges, especially if you have the single family home in Nashua now is selling at $600,000 or something, like $650,000. You're not going to get if they're going FHA, there's generally a reason that you landed there, right? It was either some sort of credit issue. There may be just a down payment requirement need that they just can't get there with the bigger down payment, whatever the case may be. But if they're buying a $600,000 house, generally they're not putting 25% down on an FHA loan. That's more going to be conventional. So so we'll see those increase a little bit, and hopefully that's a little more uniform across the state.
Do you think that'll be within the next 6 months?
Yeah, we'll hear it. I think we'll get the final word here probably in the next few weeks. We'll hear what they're
interesting.
doing. Yeah.
Okay.
Fannie also is going to allow people who've become self-employed really to accept 1 year of self-employment now, as long as they came from some similar line of work. So if you had somebody that worked in, call it hairstylist, and then they come in and they buy their own salon type of thing, as long as they can show a year of tax returns that they're cash flowing well and we can qualify them, and they don't have to wait the 2-year requirement for self-employed. So
That's awesome.
that's
Something that Kendall and I, when he first retired from the NFL, I mean, we called you like so many times trying to go through this, but we didn't have an income yet because we were just starting real estate, didn't have the NFL income anymore. So we could only qualify, I think, for a jumbo, but the jumbo, our purchase price had to be over $650 or something like that. And we both were like, $650,000. We would never pay that much for a house. We thought that was completely crazy. Yeah. So we had to buy a house in cash. And then it ended up being fine. We sold it a couple of years later and then moved into a nicer house. But we're like, what do we do here? But the self-employment thing would have helped if it was only 1 year at that point.
And I think that's just a function of like the new economy that's happening, right? You've got a lot of people now that can make money in so many different ways on their phone, right?
Yeah.
You know, you'll get these lenders that come out and they are very niche-y. They'll have very specific products for certain things. Generally, those people need 20% down though, right? Mm-hmm. So there's still this misconception out there for the regular first-time buyer with a standard job salary that they need 20% down. And that is absolutely not the case. I mean, you can still do this with 3% down.
Right. There's a lot of programs.
Yeah,
that
there's
you can
a lot
get
of
3 to
programs.
5% down.
Absolutely. But when you get into anything that starts with niche, if that's the first thing out of your mouth, you can pretty much bank on 20% down.
Yeah.
But again,
because it's riskier.
It's riskier, and there's alternatives there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's good.
Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. I feel like this was all really valuable information that'll help a lot of people, especially just letting people know what their options are for financing because, as you said, there are a lot of misconceptions that you have to have 20% down. You have to have a W-2 job, and that's not really what is needed anymore. So
yeah, and there's way more flexibility out there than people think. So we just, like I said, we just try to have a conversation with them for a couple minutes and get it on the table and go from there. So
yeah, all right. Well, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
All right.